there's a lot of fear around employees sharing on social media. And I think that stops a lot of companies even getting started, really. I think the important thing here really is to address these fears head on, not and try and imagine them away. But at the core of it, really, I think, is you need a set of strong guidelines, guardrails, and these work for both sides, really. This is where the employees know what they can and can't say. But if you're doing this, the key thing is don't make them complicated. Don't turn it into a big kind of manual. It needs to be pretty simple because they need to remember it when they're posting what the core rules are. There is actually one third fear, actually, it's thinking about fears, which is that if employees go out there sharing on social media, they're going to get poached in some way. But my view again is that the opposite is likely to happen. You're going to attract more new talent because people will see that you trust employees, that you'll keep your employees because you're empowering them. And I guess if they do go somewhere else, you've treated them well, so they will continue to be advocates for your business.
Welcome to the Internal Marketing Podcast, the unique podcast series that flips the marketing conversation from external to internal, exploring all the ways that companies can build the brand and drive growth by engaging and empowering its employees to become powerful ambassadors of the company brand. I'm your host, Kerry-Ann Stimson, and I'm very happy to bring you this episode where we'll be talking about how you can build out your very own employee ambassador program. But first, make every internal email a great experience with Workshop, the #1 internal marketing email tool. Effortlessly create, send, manage, and measure engaging email campaigns, newsletters, and announcements. Workshop is the easiest email editor ever and streamlines workflows with features like permissions and list management. Their powerful analytics provide valuable insights into engagement, open rates, and more. See why Workshop has become the go-to email tool for internal teams at hundreds of top-tier companies like Panera Bread, HarperCollins, Jim Beam, and more. Go to useworkshop.com. Now, let's jump into this conversation with my featured guest, Andrew Seel. Andrew is the CEO of Togethr, and he'll be sharing the 10 steps you should take to build out your very own employee ambassador program. Hi, Andrew. Welcome to the Internal Marketing Podcast. I'm very happy to have you.
Oh, thank you so much, Kerry-Ann. It's really lovely to be here. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, this is going to be a great conversation because it's going to be filled with a lot of practical tips. And in this particular conversation, we're going to be talking about an employee ambassador program. A lot of companies seem to be going in the direction of implementing employee advocacy and employee ambassador programs. In your view, is it better suited for companies in particular industries? Or maybe is it better suited for B2B versus B2C?
My view is it's suited for every kind of company. It does slightly vary on what you're trying to achieve. I think that's probably the key point. And you do hear a lot of people talking about programs in B2B companies. I think that's mainly when you're thinking about sales. I mean, I think that's based on the idea that the B2C sales cycle is more complex and requires the buyer to conduct more research. So employee experts, for example, helping that journey definitely helps more on the B2B side. Having said that, there are opportunities in B2C as well, where there are products which require more knowledge, say, I don't know, cars or tech, for example. But I think if you look at it from a point of view of recruitment and the employee brand, I think there's an opportunity for all companies to get involved. Everyone's looking to hire the best people. So, the thing I think you need to do really is kind of break your organization into different groups, really. You've got leadership, sales, subject matter experts, and then perhaps kind of the wider employees. And then perhaps think about how these different groups might then act on social media towards achieving your goals. And I think that while the sales group is pretty obvious, I think the wider set of employees can all get involved in sharing the company experience of working for a company, talking about, the outcomes of the employee brand and so on and so forth. So I think there's a real opportunity for everyone to get involved in all companies in that case.
Absolutely. I think it's kind of obvious almost based on the picture we painted so far in this discussion, Andrew, the benefits to the company. But What are the benefits to the employees of an employee ambassador program? I'd love to just hear from you because sometimes I know there tends to be resistance, understandably so, on the part of employees because they're like, what is the company going to turn me into a walking, talking billboard for the brand? It's all about the company making money. And yeah, if a company makes money, then that's job security for me, I guess, perhaps, or an improved chance of job security for making revenue and making profit and doing well. But I think there's an obvious question. What's the benefit to the employee?
It's a great question, and I agree. It's probably the biggest question I'm asked really is why would I do it? Why would employees do it? I guess I like to turn it around really and think, well, why wouldn't they do it? In a sense, like because these days, the opportunity, I think, to be able to build your professional brand, your professional influence on social media, it's just got so many benefits. I think that every employee, if they want to, should have these skills. It feels like it's almost the skills of a modern employee that, that they're able to communicate professionally on social media. Because I was chatting to a senior team member at a global bank recently, and he was talking about, we were talking about social media and employee advocacy, and he was talking about how he saw people in his workplace who were active on social media, and he perceived that they were getting noticed more internally. He felt they were getting more opportunities, and in his view, they weren't, even if they weren't that good. And he found this really frustrating, and he could see, he was working very hard at what he was doing, but didn't feel like he was getting noticed in the same way as these people were. So it's something I can recognize from my experience working, as an introvert, really working in large organizations. It's easy to get lost when, you're doing a great job, but if you're not shouting about it in some way, you can get lost really. And this is where I think visibility at work is a real opportunity for employees. They can really, uh, show themselves at work internally by being active and building their professional brand on social media. And it's something I wish I'd known more about. I've thought more about when I was, starting out. I wish I'd done more about this.
Yes, indeed. And, at the end of the day, having a strong personal brand is so invaluable these days. I think it's really something that employees can get excited about doing. And employee ambassador program, that's a good quality one that provides you with the tools to help empower you to do that, I think is a great, great opportunity that every employee can benefit from. I mean, going back to the concerns of an employee ambassador program, Andrew, I know that there are some companies, while they may appreciate the benefits of it, they're a little bit nervous. And I've seen this on LinkedIn a lot of times where companies are resistant. Typically, they tend to prefer to want to muzzle their employees by not having them post about anything to do with their job or the company at all. Or the flip side or the complete opposite of the spectrum of muzzling them, what they prefer to do is say, okay, look, we'll give you the content and you just copy and paste because we want to have complete control over everything you say about the company as opposed to allowing the employees to be their authentic selves if it means even taking that company content and repurposing it in a voice that's more suited to them or just to come up with their own great content that may or may not have anything to do with the company or the industry but certainly helps the company brand ultimately to go along for the ride with what the employee is doing. Oh, there are obvious risks. I think we can be honest about that. For companies who are concerned, there are risks associated with having employees being ambassadors online. And I'd love to get in your space, Andrew, with the clients you've been working with. How can companies mitigate those risks so they don't become so much of a concern to them?
It's a great question. I think you're absolutely right. There's a lot of fear around employees sharing on social media. And I think that stops a lot of companies even getting started, really. It allows it to be kind of put aside and thought about, and then never really happen. I think the important thing here really is to address these fears head on, not and try and imagine them away or imagine them not there or kind of ignore them. Um, but at the core of it, really, I think, is you need a set of strong guidelines, guardrails, whatever you call it. And these work for both sides, really. This is where the employees know what they can and can't say. And then they work to reassure the leadership that there is an approach which addresses their fears, their concerns, and there is a plan to deal with situations which arise. But if you're doing this, the key thing is don't make them complicated. Don't turn it into a big kind of manual. It needs to be pretty simple because ultimately they need to be read, they need to be understood, and they need to be remembered because people aren't going to read them again probably. So they need to remember it when they're posting what the core rules are. There is actually one third fear, actually, thinking about fears, which is that a lot of employers are concerned that if employees go out there sharing on social media, they're going to get poached in some way, because they're going to build their profiles and everyone's going to see them. So again, you need to address this fear. But my view again is that the opposite is likely to happen. You're going to attract more new talent because people will see that you trust employees to be grown ups and to go out there. You'll keep your employees because you're empowering them. And I guess if they do go somewhere else, you've treated them well, so they will continue to be advocates for your business.
Yes, indeed. And I love that you've touched on a couple of those risks and associated fears that go along with those risks. Yes, poaching is a real one. I'm glad you brought that up. My response always is, you know what, even if they do get poached, because let's face it, one of your employees may just get a better opportunity elsewhere for whatever reason. But the reality is, if you've done such a great job of building a great employer brand with your employee ambassadors, then you should have no trouble at all attracting great talent. So even if someone has to go to get an opportunity, you're going to refill that slot in a heartbeat because you've done such a great job of sharing how great it is to work with your company. Andrew, we're now at this point where we'd love to get your 10 steps. So we've gone through what is an employee ambassador program, the benefits of it, the fact that just about every single company with employees can benefit from it and can have it as part of their arsenal. And then, of course, there's benefit to employees. We've talked how we can manage the risks associated with it. And now, for anyone listening, they're like, hey, I want to start my own program. What are those steps that company leaders can take to implement their own employee ambassador program? Take it away.
So let's go with the first step, which is you need to start with the whys. Why are you doing it? If you're introducing something new like this, you are going to get pushback somewhere. Somebody's going to go, like we said earlier, why would anyone do this? So what's the point? Or what if these things go wrong? There's always some reason. So you're going to need to be ready to overcome your colleagues, your leaders, whatever their biases, their doubts, their fears to make any progress. And you need to be armed with answers to why are you doing it? Why is your organization doing it? And why would employees doing it? If you have that, you will be in a strong position to respond and to build allies and build support as you move through this. So bear those in mind
Yes,
when you're
indeed.
thinking about the whys.
All right. Number two.
So number two is what we just talked about, which is setting the guardrails. So we've discussed, one of the biggest barriers is fear gets in the way for both employers and employees. So I put this step in really early on because you need to address it really early in your program. It's one of the most, important things really, because if you're going to get knocked back because of the fears, then you're not going to get very far. So get at least your draft guardrails in approach, listen to leaders, listen to people's concerns, talk to legal and compliance, get them involved early on in the process. So people are on board and you're having, honest conversations about things and we're developing solutions to them. So getting this going at this stage is really important.
Yes, definitely those guardrails. Thank you. Number three.
So number three is, well, I say you should start small and then segment your employees. So as we discussed, fear is a big issue. So you can reduce the risk of things by starting with a smaller group in essentially a pilot form, and you can test and learn. And this can help build your internal story or internal narrative about the value and success and then grow from there rather than going for, right, we're going to launch a program to, the entire company, which could be anything from, 100 to hundreds of thousands, which to me increases the risk and obviously makes it much, much harder to adapt quickly. Small groups, you can move and change and adapt quite quickly as you learn. So I would suggest, start small. So depending on an organization size, that could be as few as 5 people or maybe 50 people. But it makes it so much more manageable if you start small.
Yes, indeed. And I'll definitely second the point about the pilot, starting small. Instead of boiling the ocean up front, it's kind of like a nice testing period, what works, what doesn't work. And then you can talk about the wins and the lessons learned. And the wins actually is a great opportunity to invite more folks in. All right. Number 4.
Number 4. So the next thing I suggest you do is start an employee advocacy conversation internally. So I've mentioned this before, but you need to focus on what's in it for them to get people on board. It's not about mandating that everyone needs to be doing, or I don't know, doing it in your appraisals or something like that. That's just going to demotivate everybody. So I think start an ongoing internal conversation. This is where your internal marketing really comes into its own. Thinking through, what's going to capture the interest of employees, what's of value to them, and then addressing this through different forms of internal marketing content. So whether you're doing a newsletter or a learning lunch or a town hall or an internal blog, whatever it might be, you can talk about, the barriers and, employees might face, or the benefits of sharing, or tips from growing your personal brand, all those kind of different things. You can start talking about those issues really, and then listening out for feedback. What do people say in the learning lunch, or are people engaging with your internal newsletter? What's going on? So that can really get a picture really, rather than just launching it outright and people go, oh my God, I've got to suddenly got to start doing this. You're starting to build that culture of advocacy.
Yes, and I'm glad you mentioned internal marketing. I always like to say there can be no employee advocacy, or in this case, employee ambassadorship or ambassador program without great internal marketing, because it starts there with the engagement, the education, sensitization, and just really building that culture and that energy. It's really wonderful. Great. Number 5.
So once you've started your conversation, you need to create a system to make it easy for employees to share. Because ultimately, success on social media comes from having a clear idea of what you're saying, who you're saying it to, and then saying that on a consistent basis. But this is often the biggest challenge for employees. They're not really sure what they're supposed to be saying or who they're saying it to. And building a regular habit is pretty challenging for all of us. So I think it's important to recognize that and then create a system which helps employees, work out what they're writing about, who they're talking to, how they can develop ideas, and how they can write those posts, quickly and successfully.
Yes, indeed. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I find that correct, where a lot of the times what we set up as, I guess, the approach that employees can use, particularly when it comes to creating content or repurposing content, it's not always designed to fit the lifestyle of the employees who really and truly, let's face it, they got a job and they're very focused on that. They have to be. But it's really good to make sure that what it is you're setting up as kind of like their steps and their toolkit, as it were, is practical and suits them and their reality as opposed to someone else's. All right, where are we now? Number 6?
Number 6, yeah. So this one's acknowledge. This is step 6. So I think one of the greatest motivators for anyone is feedback. So I think it's really important that when employees set out on this journey to start, sharing on say LinkedIn and building their presence, they need to feel they're making progress and they're actually beginning to master this as an activity. I think it's quite easy to start sharing an opinion, almost sharing into a black hole, and has anyone seen me? Did anyone notice what I'm doing? Is this of any value? Or am I wasting my time? And, because all these doubts start coming in when you haven't got enough likes, or whatever it might be, on any particular day. So I think it's important for the company to recognize that if you're running a program, that you need to be out there acknowledging what people are doing and the value they're creating, for themselves, but for the company. Now
Yes.
with the advent of employee advocacy tech, a lot of platforms you can do this all have things like gamification, and people can get very excited. Program managers, well, we've got gamification, we've got leaderboards, and we've got this, and this is the answer to all ongoing motivation challenges. And while it definitely can help, I think it's important to remember it's not for everyone. And I think that's the thing I would say generally is that people are motivated by different things, and you need to recognize that in a program. So some people are very much motivated by getting top of the leaderboard and earning the most points, whatever it is. other people, or perhaps just, well, actually, one thing I've really found actually is that a simple acknowledgement by the brand channel, the brand associate channel, for example, or a manager or a leader in an organization engaging with their posts or even providing supportive comments.
Yes, indeed. And I appreciate the acknowledgement by the official channel. It really does help when the company channels even just highlight who their ambassadors are, celebrate what they're doing. I think it's a great way, again, to motivate. And it is a way of feedback to say, hey, keep going, or this is where you can improve, or, it's really just making sure they're not swimming out there on their own. All right. Number 7.
Number
Yeah.
7, yeah. So
Yes.
number 7 is now you've got started and everyone's sharing, you need to start gathering testimonials. Now, I read this great quote the other day in the press somewhere about creating change, and it said that data alone won't overcome the obstacle. It's going to take a lot of storytelling, and I thought that was brilliant. I think it says it all really when it comes to actually convincing uh, other people for the need of change and them to act on that change. Because typically at this point, you've started your pilot. At some point, you're going to be looking to scale it up. So you need to recruit further employees and you need to get leadership on board because it's probably going to cost more money and get more people involved, et cetera, et cetera. And that's where I think the storytelling comes in. It's not just about going, here's some social media stats, we've got X level of engagement and this much, reach or whatever it might be. But for most people in senior leadership positions, it's a bit of, it's almost like, so what? Or it's easy to dismiss, really. So I think you need to bring the whole thing to life by humanizing it with relatable stories, examples, and testimonials about the experience. Humanizing it really make a huge difference to, its future opportunities.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. All right. Almost there. Number 8.
So number 8 is quite simple. It is repeat. So the best teacher, in my view, is experience. And it's one of the great benefits of running a pilot. It's a controlled way of testing ideas, learning and evolving. So what I'm suggesting here is you go back to step 4 and you repeat the steps 4 to 7, really. You started small. Now let's start growing. Look at the results you've achieved in the first iteration of it. Were your hypotheses correct? What insight can you draw from the data? What feedback did you get on how it was working? Have people dropped off? Ask those questions. Why didn't people sign up, or why didn't they share? Uh, and again, I think as I said earlier, having smaller iterations, you can rapidly adapt and change and improve what you're doing. So it didn't quite work. It's not sort of the end of the world. You can change quite quickly.
And number 9.
So now it's going brilliantly. It's all going fantastically. So this is the point where it's going to become hard to manage, really. You've got too many people involved, and you're going to need to address. There'll be an internal demand for more data, and you want to see the results from you can't just manually count the people, at this point. Because if you can justify a bigger investment, they're going to need that information. So if you haven't already, this is probably the time to think about bringing in a tech platform. So tech platforms typically, they make it easier to manage, providing, prompts and support to employees. You can probably extend learning by offering advice and tips through there. You can provide more personalized feedback. And you can obviously capture, a lot of data and measure that you can combine results of what everyone's doing. So this is very much the time to start thinking about transitioning to a tech platform and then really starting to scale up.
And it's a great sign. It's a great, great sign of growth happening. Number 10.
This is the final one. This is easy. You could start today.
All right.
So now you know the process. The question is, what are you waiting for? So you could start with the first 4 steps today. You could start by identifying, your whys. Why is your organization doing it? Why are your employees doing it? And either age in all your conversations. You can start drafting your guide rails. Look at your existing social media guidelines, for example. How do they work? Are they sufficient for what your needs are? How can you simplify them? Can you think of, 10 plus participants? You'd probably, who's already active in social media organization, go talk to them. What are they sharing? what would they be happy to share? And you need to start developing a content plan to begin your internal conversation, your internal marketing around this. How could when internal marketing was already happening, how could you be part of that? So those 4 points you could start today, and then that would put you in a really strong position to then start engaging with the relevant people internally to get your free program fully launched. Because I talk to quite a lot of people who say, I've been really trying to, interest people in employee advocacy, but I just can't seem to, um, get an engagement with them internally. But I think, you need to start putting these things in place. And if you show you have a process of how it's going to work, that's straightforward and they can understand, and it puts you in a strong position.
Let's start today. Wonderful. Andrew, this has been such a great conversation, and I'm so very happy that you've taken the time to share all of your wonderful insights with us. And I'm now at the point in my interviews, typically when we're at what I call the final takeaway or the final nugget or the final gem, which is really asking you, based on everything you would have shared with us, what's the one major takeaway that you think they should come away with, having heard everything you would have shared?
I think for an employee advocacy or employee ambassador program to be successful, it needs to be first and foremost about helping others. So when you're encouraging employees to talk essentially on behalf of the brand, you should ask them to always think, who am I talking to and how can this help them? And I found this as a sort of simple way of thinking, it's almost a change of mindset. So it's rather than being just about talking about the brand, it's like, well, how can I help my audience? And I think this is really shown to be a real eye-opener for many people I've spoken to on programs. And, if you achieve this consistently across your brand, if your employees are helping people all the time, the benefits quickly come to the brand.
I think that's an excellent takeaway, because ultimately, whenever you are building a brand, whether it be a company brand or a personal brand, it's about, of course, having identified your audience, who it is you want to serve. They're asking, how can you help me? And the fact is, you're solving a problem and you want to share how you solve that problem and how you solve that problem better than anyone else. And so, starting from a place of knowing how I can serve, how I can help, and providing that content that helps, not sells really, because I always believe in the mantra help first, sell second, but helpful content that helps to support a process of building connection, building community, relationship, and ultimately, of course, the brand's benefit, the company brand and the personal brand. So I think that's a great takeaway point there, Andrew. Andrew, thanks again so much for being a part of this conversation. And as I ask all my awesome guests, how can we, the internal marketing tribe, support you?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. It's been great chatting to you there. Really, really enjoyed that. So thank you so much for having me. Well, first of all, I guess, please do connect with me. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm really passionate about this area. So if you're interested in it or you're doing it or you're active in some way in employee advocacy or in any way, I'd love to connect with you and chat more about this. And secondly, the other thing I'd add really was that I'm really passionate about the idea of getting more companies involved in employee advocacy and trying to find ways to simplify and open up the process, which is one of the reasons why I sort of keen on this 10-step process. So I'm currently writing a book at the moment, actually, which expands on this, on the process I've talked about today. So if anyone's out there who's implemented the program or wants to implement or has considered it and decided not to implement it, or equally to employees who are part of programs, I'd love to chat to people about their experiences, because I'm trying to sort of build up more research for the book. So if this is you, please also do get in touch. I'd love to connect.
Yes, indeed. And I support that. Yes, everyone, please follow Andrew on LinkedIn. He's there just about every day, it feels like, Andrew. I want to be like Andrew when I grow up. He's there just about every day, spouting valuable content. And I'm glad to hear about your book. So please, what we'll do is we'll leave your LinkedIn URL in the show notes. And then we're going to have your company URLs. So thank you so much again, Andrew, for everything you would have shared with us today, and wishing you all the very best in everything that you do.
You too, Kerry-Ann. Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Internal Marketing Podcast. I'm sure you got some great takeaways from this conversation. And if you haven't already subscribed to the Internal Marketing Podcast, then please join the tribe. And don't forget, to leave a review and share this podcast with anyone whom you believe will find it valuable as well. I'm your host, Kerry-Ann Stimson, and I look forward to your joining me next time.